Thank you, Barbara, and welcome to everybody. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Yes, we have been listening in the previous sessions how disruptive is the digital transformation we are now experiencing, changing our lives and the ways to work. To deep dive on this topic, the session, as anticipated by Barbara, is on Disrupt or Be Disrupted, the case for strategic risk management. And I have the honor today to introduce our special guest, Deepak Padaki. Deepak is Executive Vice President, Group Head, Strategy and Chief Risk Officer at Infosys. His responsibilities include a long-term strategic planning for the organization and the management of cross-functional strategic initiatives. As the Chief Risk Officer, he is responsible for defining the company's risk management framework, identifying and monitoring the risk to the successful execution of the company's strategies and operations. And I'm proud to say that in his role, Deepak received last week from RMS, the Risk Management Society, counting more than 10,000 risk managers practitioners around the world, the Global ERM Award of Distinction for Infosys. The honor recognizes the team's outstanding success in improving transformation outcomes, growing revenue, protecting margins, and strategic decision-making. Deepak works closely with the Risk Committee of the Board of Directors. He oversees the Infosys Innovation Fund that invests in the startup ecosystem globally. And he is a member of several Infosys subsidiaries around the world. Deepak, the stage is yours. Welcome to the GRC Summit.
Thank you, Marco, and good afternoon to all of you. It's great to be here. I hope you're having an enjoyable conference so far from the comfort of your homes or in your work bubbles, as they say nowadays. Infosys is a large global provider of technology solutions and services, and we work very closely with some of the biggest and most influential companies around the world and across industry sectors. So we're very privileged to have a ringside view into how these companies are framing their strategies and facing this confluence of disruptive trends that are appearing today. So I thought I will share a little bit of what I'm learning, and since this is a short session, let me dive right into it. I want to start with a scenario that I frequently cite, one that's not entirely hypothetical. It's the plight of an automobile manufacturer, one of those large global companies that's been around for several decades, and who are making combustion engine driven cars for the longest time, focusing on markets of mid-income people for whom owning a car is their dream. And then suddenly in the last few years, what they're faced with is a younger demographic, a millennial population that believes they prefer to do ride sharing instead of actually owning a car, owning an asset. At the same time, you have concerns rising over climate change and government stepping in with very strict compliance rules on emissions and so on. And then out of nowhere, suddenly they're faced with this new age company that brings in alternative disruptive technology, right? Electric vehicles or software driven technologies that are either more efficient or more appealing to a younger population. And then internally, you have employees who have been around for so long and well ingrained in the older technologies and the older processes, and they need a massive amount of reskilling for the new age. And then not to forget your investors who continue to demand returns every quarter, and ironically are taking those returns and pumping them into your next generation companies who are really your competition in the future. So this company then comes out with a strategy for their transformation. They are looking at how they can also jump onto the bandwagon of the newer technologies while retiring their older products. But what you have to realize is, they have to spend money today on their old systems, on their legacy, in order to keep it alive because of changing regulations, because of continuing changes in customer preferences. And all that time, knowing that that old business line is actually going to be cannibalized, right? So you need to keep spending on the old stuff, knowing that it's actually going to cannibalize while you're looking at the new things. What do you do with your car dealerships, for instance, right, which you nurtured over so many years? Suddenly, there is this direct-to-consumer sales model where you can sell to your consumers directly online, right? Uh, your profits are getting squeezed because suddenly the bargaining power of a few buyers, like the ride-hailing companies or rental car companies, is increased, and it's not a larger population that's looking at your cars. What do you do with your old factories and your old supply chains, which are getting obsolete, and you need to replace them almost altogether with supply chain partners in, let's say, battery technologies or different kinds of assembly lines, right? And then, not to forget, you at all this while you have to continue to spend in sales and marketing and push your brand up as one of those cool cars that people will aspire for, right? And assuming again that this company has gone through this and they've got a plan and they're starting to execute on it, suddenly in 2020 you have this pandemic that hits, right? Suddenly, people now don't want to go ride sharing anymore, because of hygiene reasons. Uh, Maybe you don't need a car with that many features anymore because you're not driving 30 kilometers to the office every day. You just need a small vehicle to go down to the grocery store next door, right? Uh, there's geopolitical and trade wars that result from the economic crisis. And so what you thought you could build as a cost-effective supply chain in China suddenly becomes a question mark for you, right? And your employees now need support to work remotely. Increase budgets for automation and resilience and so on, right? So this is a very real problem. How does a company like this automobile manufacturer have the agility to actually counter so many different kind of disruptive trends? And by the way, this pattern is not limited to this industry. It's there across every other industry, whether you look at retail or utility or banking. For instance, in banking and the payment, you look at the payment space, banks are getting relegated to a corner of regulatory compliance, whereas the cool fintechs are really taking off the customer front end and the customer relationships. When you look at, for instance, in utility companies, how they have to reposition themselves not as energy suppliers, but really as advisors to end customers on how they're consuming energy, right? And it's not limited also to traditional companies. One can argue that, for instance, Netflix, who famously disrupted the Blockbuster from video rentals, the moment somebody like Disney came along with their own walled garden of content and distribution, forced Netflix to then get into a riskier proposition of actually producing content, right? And this is a very different business model than just streaming videos online. So what really is going on, right? I was talking to a group of young MBA students recently and was telling them that just in their own lifetime, so much has changed. 9/11, for instance, questioned our sense of freedom and security and travel. The 2008 crisis questioned the meanings of financial stability, of job security, and then more recently, some of the geopolitics and the trade wars are actually throwing spanners in what we thought was a stable globalization regime, right? And then if you look at demographics, it's polarizing wealth, it's polarizing opportunities, polarizing generations. And then some of these catastrophic events like pandemics and climate events even are putting a big question mark around the planet sustainability. So if you look at this chart, and then I've purposely put in technology-led disruption at the top there because I'll talk a little bit more about that. If you really look at this chart, what's going on is all these macro risks that we used to put at the last slide of our strategy presentations as an FYI, something to keep your eyes on, but not really ingrained into the strategy or your strategy execution. are now staring us in the face. These changes are happening very quickly. They're impacting fundamental business models. They're impacting industry boundaries. They're impacting your ability to innovate quickly. They're impacting your supply chain, your operations in a very, very distinct manner and very, very fast manner. So today, when we talk to our clients and you're talking about strategy, one thing is sure, all assumptions are back on the table, right? Everything has to be re-questioned. And so the question comes in, how are companies actually dealing with this kind of complexity and risks? And how are they coming out as a winner? How are they not just changing the engine of an airplane in flight, but preparing them to change it multiple times while in flight? And in all my conversations, really three trends are emerging on how these companies are looking to disrupt and not get disrupted. So I have three shorthand notations here. The first is what I call as n equal to 1, which is really an obsession with your customer, right? An obsessive focus on the customer. Today, new age customers, and by customer I also mean your internal employees who are using your processes and your system, they've grown up with the coolness of the B2C apps that we all have on our phone today. So they expect great design in process, they expect great design in any interaction, in connectedness, in features, and all of that. And they're willing to give you their data if you can, in return, give them personalized experiences, personalized marketing, personalized products. But then they demand purpose, they demand trust, they demand consistency. And the strategic risks that this raises is really about how are you organized internally? Are you able to react quickly? Are you able to bring together different silos and provide a uniform experience to the client, to your consumers, right? Can you provide them trust on the data that they're giving you? And is your information security strong enough? Is your brand reflecting purpose? So while many companies look at this n equal to 1 as a strategic initiative and how to increase their customer focus, they have to think of all these risks that are underlying it and keep that in track. The second one is really about what I call as 0 to 1. How quickly can you go from 0 to 1 in your new ideas and bring velocity into your innovation? And here, I think the primary thing that most companies are looking at is, do they have an agile enough engine that can bring new products or new business models to market? Last week we released a report along with FMA about innovation in retail banking, and it was quite revealing. About 750 institutions participated, but only 7% of them really said that they've deployed any digital transformation initiatives at scale, right, with the right benefits. In fact, what's happened this year is that the self-perception of many companies that they thought they were innovative, has actually dropped. Our count is last year there was about 14% of companies that believed they were innovative in nature, and this time only 9% are saying they're so, right, because they were not able to keep up with the velocity of innovation. And so one of the important things to remember in going from 0 to 1 is that today you don't have the luxury of sitting back and looking at all the options and scenarios and then embarking on an initiative. What you need is a quick reaction, start it quickly, have the right amount of delegation, empowerment, but then also have the feedback loop so that you can fail quickly. And you need a very strong strategic risk management program that can keep the guardrails while you have embarked on some of these initiatives. So that's the second piece about going from 0 to 1. And the third one is really about how to increase the return on your existing assets and investments, right? And while earlier it used to be okay to get 10%, 20% productivity improvement in a year or 2 years, today you're really looking at how can you generate an exponential return, right? In other words, taking a very, very hard look at cost structures, leveraging things like automation, repurposing of assets, and so on. And again, here there's an element of risk, because if you do this too quickly, if you start to cut costs too quickly, then you risk that you will cut off your cash cow, which is funding your number 2 bucket, which is the innovation, right? And then at the same time, if you do it too slowly, then you run the risk of cannibalization. You run the risk of your brand suddenly losing value as a player of yesterday and not of tomorrow, right? So when we look around, there are several iconic companies that have actually demonstrated how can come out as winners by focusing on these levers, and it's very evident that many of these companies which invested in digital technology early have come out more and more resilient. So finally, I want to just talk about very quickly on what's stopping you. Like, what is stopping these companies from actually implementing these strategies? So we run a survey every year, and we categorize them into three parts. The watchers really are looking at using digital for digitization, which is for efficiency, and there are about 10% there. Last year, there was more than 20, I think about 28% 2 years ago in this bucket. So clearly, many of these companies are moving from beyond just digitization into the explorer category, where they're using it for differentiation in customer engagement or product and so on. And this explorer category has actually grown quite a bit in the last year. But the third category, which is visionaries, these are companies that are looking at digital for transformation, right? And they're using it to completely change their business model. And this has remained steady at 22%. Very interestingly, they have not been able to, there are companies that reach the ceiling and are not able to break beyond the explorers into visionaries. And what's coming in the way there is on the right side, you can see, if you remove the first one, which is their gravity of their legacy, it's really about cultural elements, right? It's not technology or technical elements. It's risk averse culture, lack of talent and skills, collaboration, silos. All of these are really soft things that only a risk management system can pick up as secondary risks. And really focusing your risk management on those aspects can help the business implement the strategies for digital transformation. So, I want to stop here. I think there is this year, 2020, has really pushed us all into intense reflection and reimagination. And there's this underlying sense that something is shifting in a very profound way in business. And it's only through preparedness and strategic risk management that we can overcome some of these challenges, but at the same time create opportunities to become even stronger. So on that note, thank you, and perhaps we can open it up for a few questions.
Thank you, Deepak. Very good insights, and thank you for positioning your view on the market and on the overall risk management and the transition we are facing. There are a couple of questions already coming from the audience, and if you like, we can cover the first one. So is financial inclusion a necessity or a drain on resources? And what emerging technologies really means for financial services? If you can provide your view on this.
No, absolutely. I think financial inclusion actually is coming out as one of those macro items. Again, it's coming partly from something that I spoke about the demographics and how it is changing and polarizing populations, right? So financial inclusion becomes extremely important. And when I talk to fintechs and large financial institutions around the world today, this is definitely one of the things that they want. But I think the big way to overcome this today is actually the use of technologies. Of course, there's always policy and regulations that you have to influence to make sure that it's a level playing field, that you have your advantages really as an advantage. But using technology to reach large-scale populations and underserved demographies is become a reality today. I mean, if I only take, even if I take India as a great example, what we have done through the unified payments interface here in this country over the last few years, today, as a result of what's happening with the pandemic and the aversion to cash and so on, it's actually created more number of transactions, right? And I think we are processing more on our network on payments today than any credit card transaction provider, right? So financial inclusion comes through because of the technology. It comes through because Now that mobile and networks are there and omnipresent everywhere, you can really leverage that to bring more people onto the network. And the flip side of that is, as more people come onto a digital infrastructure, you have more data to handle. You have more ability to make wise decisions about shifting your processes and so on. So that would be my take on financial inclusion as a strategic risk that you have to manage.
Great, Deepak. Thank you. I have a personal curiosity, being managing a multinational company like Infosys, dealing with different geographies with an extended organization, how you're approaching and dealing with your internal enterprise risk management program. Can you share some evidence?
No, Marco, that's a interesting question indeed. It's something that, of course, we have been battling with for the last few years. And yeah, it is in some senses, it's a very simple business that we have because it's about IT services and solutions. But on the other hand, the complexity of operations, because we are global and large, and we deal with people who are perhaps the human element is the riskiest, right, in everything that we do because it's unpredictable sometimes. So what we have done with our ERM program is, I think the philosophy is to embed deeply. And to embed deeply, you need the technology, right? And you need technology support. You need to put your ideas and the vision for the ERM framework into a technology element, which can then reach out, across to the population of your company. And I'll give you an example. For instance, take this macro risk of sanctions against specific companies, or even some executives of companies, right? That we have seen that's happening around the world today. And what if your company is open to that risk that you might be working or you might be pursuing an opportunity with one of these companies, and then that comes back to bite the rest of your business because by working on these, then your company gets blacklisted, and then all kinds of bad things can happen, right? Now, this is something that the only sustainable way to mitigate this risk is to embed it deep into that organization, right? So the sales guys have to know that this is a risk. The people running the projects have to know that this is a risk. The support functions like finance and HR have to know that this is a risk, right? So you can't sit back and say this risk, and I will run an audit control and make sure that everything is okay every 3 months. It has to get ingrained inside. For instance, a salesperson has to be thinking that if I have to meet my bonus target, how can I do it without these kind of opportunities that risk the company, right? So these are very live and real examples, and they happen overnight because suddenly there's a regulation, and then you have to react. But you have to be able to get this down to the last element of your organization. So, like I said, we embed deep. We spend a lot of time in creating awareness. We spend a lot of time in embedding the risk management into small decision support, fora, and that way, people are more aware of the risks, and then they plan opportunities around the risk. And I think that's the way we are looking at it. Cybersecurity is another great example. I think security uh, is one of those areas where you can have all the systems that you want, you can have all the policies that you want, but the rigor of somebody following an instruction or adopting a standard or setting a guideline, that determines the fate of what happens, right? And so unless you embed it deep, you won't get the results that you want. So I would say these are the two main things: awareness and embedding deep has been the mantra at Infosys.
Great. Thank you, Deepak. Very insightful and very aligned also with our strategy on the market. And for that reason, we are really collaborating strong as a partners in the market. One last question for you coming from the audience. How are you designing and any examples you can share on other companies on how to approach the risk management issues we are facing, and that could be the end of your speech and providing sharing information during this session. Deepak.
Yeah, no, thank you, and let me also say thank you to your company because you're a big partner in how we are rolling out our strategic risk management. So thank you for that partnership and support. But I would also say that a few important things in ERM in these times. The first is not to design your function as a gatekeeper, right? The risk function has to be a decision support system, has to enable the business. And that goes to the mindset of risk officers and members of a risk function in an organization. Are you there to help the business succeed, or are you there just to protect, the company? And if you wear the second hat, which is just to protect, then you don't come up with the solution mindset. You look for issues and you raise them, and you say, unless you close these, I will not take off the box. So this attitude of I'm here to help you, and I can bring value to you achieving your business objectives. That's a very important mindset change, and something that we have worked on very, very hard in our organization. In fact, the risk office at Infosys, the byline for us is "How can I help you?" Right? It's not about how can I analyze whether there's something risky in what you're trying to do. So I would say, that it starts there at the top and all the way down. The second very important thing in these times when there are so many different types of risks, macro, micro, strategic, execution, operational, whatever it is to have a common standard. What we found a few years ago is that management was spending time on risks that probably were not the biggest risks, right? And today we all know that time and money is scarce, and you need to react quickly, and therefore a good ERM system should be able to filter this out, get the views of the people quickly at the sensors, and then bubble up the most critical risks so that time is well spent to mitigate some of them. It becomes especially important in strategic risk management because this can mitigating the risk actually can help the company achieve its strategies, right? And so you don't want to be spending time on things that are not linked with the strategic objectives of the company. So these are a couple of examples. Of course, there's so much more that we have done, and I'm sure there'll be opportunities for us to share that this audience. So thank you,
Yeah.
Marco, and thank you
And
for having me on the show.
thank you again, Deepak, for with this last strong message. We end our session. We really appreciate your contribution to our GRC summit. Thank you again.